And so in a very intellectual culture in which we live, the kind of differences, distinctions, and persecutions or suffering that we might experience are quite different than those things, no less important, and no less likely to drive us off course or carry us along in culture. And so we need to ask the question, how do we live in Jesus' direction in an uncooperative culture? Peter would go on and he says, listen, here's why I'm writing it. Here's why I'm writing it. I don't want you to miss this. And so if you have your Bibles, go to 1 Peter chapter 5. This is the very end of this short letter. You only have to turn like one page, maybe two. This is why you're going to read what letter this week? What are you reading this week? 1 Peter. It's not going to take you long. 1 Peter chapter 5, you'll see one statement after another to help people live in a place that's not their home. He says this in verse 12. He says, I've written to you and sent you this short letter to encourage you. He knew that what they were enduring, they needed courage to face. And to assure you, reassure, if you're wondering, if you're doubting, I just want to assure you, Peter says, that what you are experiencing, and this is mind-boggling, is truly part of God's grace for you. So stand firm in this grace. What? What an un-American thing to say. Hardship is a problem. Hardship cannot be redeemed. Hardship should be avoided. We should move toward comfort. We should move toward preference. This is so countercultural. What Peter is not saying is that the hardship was caused by God. What Peter is saying is that the hardship and the way God meets you in it will form you and shape you. And God has laid a foundation. When he says stand firm in his grace, what this literally means is stand in the grace that God already established for you. He knew, he saw, he'll carry you, he will make it worth it, he will meet you in the midst of it. Don't give up. That's what he's saying. And that's why he's saying courage to you, assurance to you. Don't doubt, don't think for a moment that because it's difficult, God has given up on you. He is with you and he is so strong. He doesn't need to just rescue you from hardship. He's so strong he can carry you through hardship and make it mean something and form you into the kind of person who can endure things you never thought you could endure because of his strength and his partnership in you. And so Peter says, listen, I know you're living in a place that does not feel like home. And I know it's hard in really tangible, challenging ways. But courage to you and assurance to you. God has grace that he prearranged for you, an established foundation on which you'll be able to stand. And so flip back to the beginning of 1 Peter. I just want you to catch this, because when you read 1 Peter, what are you reading this week again? What did I say? 1 Peter. When you read 1 Peter this week, you just need to know this should land in every single day of our lives. When he writes at the beginning in 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 1 and 2, he says, I'm writing to God's chosen people. Somebody say chosen. Don't forget, you got to hold on to that. God's chosen people who are living as foreigners. He says this, God the Father knew you and chose you long ago, and his Spirit has made you holy. What Peter does right out of the gate is say, I know you're experiencing hard things, but don't forget who you are. You are known. You are chosen, and you are being made holy. In a land where you may feel completely misunderstood, you are known. And in a place where everyone on different places for different reasons might reject you, you are chosen. You are not the last one left at the line for kickball at PE. You're not a leftover, you're not neglected, you have a name, you are seen, you are known, and he chooses us. People get all caught up in who God chooses and who doesn't. God chooses everyone who responds to him. He chose every single one of us and elected every single one of us to come alive in him. And when we cooperate with that, we experience that. Every single one of us finds our way into God's family when we say yes to his choosing us. He chose us and he knows us, and it matters. And if we ever lose sight of that, we're going to lift our feet and float along with the pool, and it's not going to go well. We are known, we are chosen, and just so you don't miss it, we are made holy. Holy does not mean holier than thou. Holy, especially for you who are maybe finding your way here for the first time and have all kinds of hesitations about followers of Jesus because you've met some, and some of them are really arrogant and trying to declare all the things that are true with a certainty that's just unreasonable. And they say clarity is kindness, but it sure doesn't sound kind. It's not presented with kindness. I just want you to know that's not what holy means. Holy means set apart for a different purpose. Don't miss the first two parts of that word, set apart. The difference between us and people who don't know Jesus should be clear and is no accident. Why would anyone who doesn't live with Jesus as king live like someone who believes he is? The difference is on purpose. It's a calling we live into. We're coming. I talked to this guy at Starbucks who's just like, God is like helping him realize that selfishness is part of what makes life miserable. And so he's really working at being unoffendable and just not holding on to stuff. And he's saying, it is so freeing. It is so great. I just want people to know, like, you don't have to be ticked off. You don't have to be entitled. You don't have to worry about your rights in every single second. And I'm like, thank God for some freedom in this guy's life. And thanks for the reminder, because I lose track of that too. We're set apart for a purpose, for our joy, for God's glory, and to look different. The difference is on purpose. I just don't want us to forget that. For the next several weeks, we're going to hold on to not just those words, but more and more where Peter reminds us who we are, remembering who we are. Sometimes where we're from starts to over-influence who we think that we are, but we need to remember who we are. Tell somebody, remember who you are. That's hard when everyone around you might feel different. The word foreigners in the beginning of 1 Peter can be translated a number of ways. Foreigners, aliens, exiles, strangers, but one of my favorite is sojourners, one who's traveling in a home that is not their own, one who is residing, living, dwelling, and seeking the good of a home that is not their own. But we're not sojourners looking back in nostalgia to try to get somewhere that was before. Believe me, I'm not looking back toward Illinois, okay? We made it out. That's where we're at this point. Love the people, great to be from there, but listen, and followers of Jesus, we're not sojourners looking back trying to get home. We are looking forward in hope of what God has already arranged and promised, knowing that God has more ahead of us than we are currently experiencing now. And the way to live into that is to cooperate with him, not what's around us. A sojourner is a great image. In fact, there was one who would take that name. Her name was Isabella Baumfree. And Baumfree was not her last name. Baumfree was a Dutch word for tree. Her father was really, really tall, and so they gave this group of people the last name Baumfree. And so she actually ended up being quite tall as well. She'd be a mother of 5 who became an author, a traveling speaker, one of the only itinerant women to travel and speak across the country before the Civil War. She would eventually meet a president at the time. She stood on her own, nearly 6 feet tall, but you just need to know her history and the history of our country stands far taller than 6 feet. She was bought and sold 4 times as a chattel slave before she escaped, and her freedom was purchased for a mere $20 and her child's for 5 more. She sensed God's spirit as she would hear about the things of God. In fact, she heard it from her mother. Her mother really taught her primarily one thing, according to her. Her mom would constantly say to her kids, there is a God, and he sees you, and he hears you. She said, this was the tenor of the message I received from my mother. She held on to that. And later in life, you have to read her autobiography. Oh my goodness, it is so rich, just wow. But she encounters God in a powerful way and acknowledges that God has a calling on her life. And she would become a force for the abolition of slavery, the temperance movement, and for civil and women's rights in powerful ways. You might actually recognize her name, Sojourner Truth. Why would she take that name? Yeah, you can clap. She has an immense effect on our history. I couldn't help but, when I saw this word, I couldn't help but think of her name. I had little more reference up to this point in my life than maybe a blurb in a history book multiple times over going through school, but you got to look into her life. What a powerful, powerful life. I just tried to figure out, why did she take the name Sojourner Truth if her name was Isabella? She'd always been known as Isabella. Why did she take this? She said this, Sojourner, because I was to travel up and down the land showing people their sins and being a sign to them. And truth, because I was to declare the truth unto the people. She took on a new name because she received a new identity from a God who saw her, who heard her, who knew her, who loved her, who eventually rescued her and placed a calling on her life to seek better for those around her. She recognized that the land in which she lived was not her own, not only literally, but spiritually, and she was going to do something about it. She lived as what you might call, you could translate Peter's words as resident aliens, chosen foreigners, living differently, standing not just in opposition, not just working against the culture, but standing in Jesus' name for what is right and for what is better. Peter will say this when you get to it later in 1 Peter chapter 2. He'll say this, you, followers of Jesus, are the chosen ones. Next slide, please. You are the chosen ones by God, chosen for the high calling of priestly work, chosen to be a holy people, God's instruments. This is what she realized. God had a calling on her life to do something in his name. And if you point your life toward Jesus, the same is true for every single one of us. Chosen. Tell somebody they're chosen. Well, you're chosen not just to be belonging with God, but to what it says next, to do his work, to speak out for him, to tell others of the night and day difference that he made for you, being the kind of people who went from nothing to something, from rejected to accepted. This is what Peter says. And so he says this, friends, and I just want you to hear this really personally right now. He says this to all of those who are following Jesus, who lived in a place that didn't feel like home to them. He says, friends, this world is not your home. This world is not your home. You are chosen, you are known, you do belong, just not here. This world is not your home. And so he says this, so don't make yourselves cozy in it. In the pool imagery, don't lift your feet. No, what he says is stand firm in the grace God has already arranged for you. This is what we're going to try to, it's not easy. It's nuanced. It's hard to know how much, 1 degree or 180 degrees. Jesus, what do you want me to do? This is complicated. I want to be loving. I want to be make space for people. But God, how do I honor you first and above everything? God, you seem to align with this, but I don't know how much. And it's challenging. But we just need to stand in the grace that God, not just standing with culture, certainly not lifting our feet and just floating along with what's around us. That's crazy talk. That's not in relationship to Jesus. That's just trying to be easy about things. Nor should we be people who always just work against culture in some kind of combative, arrogant nature. That's still life just based on culture. And not even in our preferred blend of with and against, but in all of the places we find ourselves asking, Jesus, what is the direction you call us? When do I need to stand firm? When do I need to move forward? When do I need to move with? God, how do we live in a place that's not our home? Or the way we've been saying is, how do we live differently together?